Hello, and thank you for listening to my presentation. My name is Audrey, and this is for Anthropology 353, Archaeology of Rock Art. My project was titled The Hummingbirds of Horsetooth, and I chose to focus on the panel that you can see in the background here. The location of this panel is on the west-facing side of a bowling alley in Fort Collins, Colorado. There is also another panel on the north-facing side that is visually consistent with the western panel. As you can see in my just excellent little map here, this is an area that receives a lot of traffic. The western panel parallels a freight train railroad, a walking trail, and one of the primary bus routes throughout the city. The northern panel parallels another major vein of transportation through the city, which is West Horsetooth Road. And since I'm definitely no cartographer, here's another version of the map, this time from Google Maps. From the location of this panel, I think it is clear that it was meant to be seen by many passerbys, be they on foot, car, or public transportation. The location and landscape around a panel can sometimes give great insight into the panel itself. As such, here are a few photos of this area surrounding the panel. The first one is a panoramic showing you what you would see if you stood at the center of the panel looking south and west. Down this alley leads to a bus stop for the Max line. The second photo was taken at the same position, only looking north. This photo shows the ground layout near the panel. As you can see, about half of the panel has a raised gravel pit for a few feet in front of it. This photo is the view you see if you were approaching the panel from the bus stop, which is located to the south of the panel. This is the point at which you can first begin to see the panel. And this last photo is the view you have if you are turning into the alley as if you were walking to the bus stop. Now that we know where it's at, let's dive into the panel itself. First off, this panel is 80 foot long by 20 feet tall. I didn't have a measuring tape even close enough to providing a scale for this image, but I figured that if I had stumbled across this panel out in the desert or halfway up the mountain, I would have my walking stick with me. So for this project, I used a 6 foot long stick. It's not super visible in this photo, at least not as much as I would have liked, but I've highlighted it here on the screen. I also marked the stick with white tape at 1 foot from each end and in the center. It is present in several other photos, so if you get bored, you can have some fun playing I Spy. Anyway, it's a big panel and it's painted onto the corrugated metal of a building exterior. The panel also features both zoomorphic and geometric imagery. The primary visual element of this panel are the 2 hummingbirds. Each hummingbird is filled with a pattern that creates a sense of movement through the use of linear and non-linear lines as well as spirals. Both hummingbirds are depicted in flight and feature a double circle behind their head like halos. They are also depicted touching beaks as they hover. The larger of the 2 birds is so large that it extends beyond the panel. Its lower half and part of its wings are cut off in the image. The colors in use for this bird are red, white that is kind of tinted green, purples, pinks, and green in the body, and pink and yellow for the halo. The smaller of the 2 hummingbirds is also depicted hovering, and the colors used in this one are orange, that same kind of tinted white, pink, dark pink, and green. The halo is light blue and orange. Because of the scale and size of the panel, I did not complete a tracing of the entire thing, but instead focused on one element. I chose the smaller of the 2 birds because it was featured in its entirety within the panel, unlike the larger of the 2 birds. I traced it in both color and in silhouette, and you can see how the lines come out a little bit wavy due to the corrugated nature of the material it was painted on. The background of this panel is also composed of blue and white rings, which get closer together as they approach the tunnel element of the panel. And then for the tunnel element, or at least what I have dubbed the tunnel element, is this yellow bit where the lines shift to red and fade into a lighter yellow. There are two ways that I think that this feature could be interpreted. If viewed in this panel alone, it could be seen as a source of light that is emitting the rest of the imagery in the panel, or it can be viewed as the inverse, appearing more like a tunnel going inward. This feature is further enhanced when one views the western and northern panels together, as you can see in this photo here. It creates the illusion of the two panels being connected. However, I think it is important to note that while the two panels are visually connected in their overall style, a comparison of each panel shows that the north-facing panel was created by a different artist, or at least at a different time than the western panel. As you can see here, the hand-painted elements of each panel were made from different types of brushes. The western panel appears to have been made with a traditional style paintbrush, that is to say, having bristles likely created from animal hair, whereas the northern panel is made from using a foam head brush, and you can see that in the pattern left behind in the brush strokes. In addition to this, you can see the difference in style when comparing the line work in each panel. The west panel tends towards clean lines, whereas the north panel has a less refined outline around many of its elements. During my research into this panel, I was fortunate enough to find something that most archaeologists could only dream of having for their rock art from tens of thousands of years ago. I found both a news article about the creation, giving me the exact date the panel was created, and a video of its creation giving insight to how it was made. From this research, I can tell you that the creation of this panel began on August 21st, 2017, and took about a week to finish. And here is the video. From this video and from an analysis of the paint, we can determine that this panel was created with cans of spray paint. However, much of the detailed work within the specific elements was hand-painted with what is likely acrylic paint. A ladder and scissor lift were also used during the creation. The panel was painted by one person, an artist named Bobby McGee Lopez, who is an artist based out of Hawaii. They were commissioned by the Fort Collins Mural Project, and the official title of this panel is Hummingbird. And the video is quite long, so I won't make everybody watch all of that. All right, so now we're going to get into the more word-heavy part of the slideshow, but we are almost to the end. For the interpretation, you should know that there are 11 species of hummingbirds native to Colorado. You should also know that in general, male hummingbirds are more colorful and patterned than female hummingbirds, and female hummingbirds are often, but not always, larger than the male birds. From this, we conclude that due to the size difference in the panel, it could be depicting a male and female hummingbird, or due to the coloration, two male hummingbirds. It is also possible that it could be depicting separate species of hummingbirds. However, it is also just as possible that these are representational and not meant to depict specifics of species or sex. Due to the very visible location and the knowledge that it was a commissioned work, I feel safe in concluding that this panel has no religious or ritual significance. It appears to have been done simply to make the city of Fort Collins more visually pleasing. Now, what are the threats to this site? Well, the panel is not very well protected. Both panels have already received enough damage. What are the threats to this site? Well, this panel is not very well protected. Both panels have already received damage enough to dent the metal. There is also almost no barriers in the area to prevent vandalism. It was unclear if any type of protective coating or varnish was applied to protect the panel from weathering. The northern panel is almost immediately adjacent to a parking spot with no curbs or barriers in between. To help conserve the preservation of this panel, I would recommend that a protective coating be applied to prevent weathering, and to install a curb between the parking lot and the panel itself, and perhaps a light should be installed in the alley to deter vandalism. And here are all of my references. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation.